Hey everyone, welcome back to Pripyat and part 2 of the new mini-series here on the channel. The first half of today's episode is going to be building the cooling towers here that you're seeing on screen, as well as a couple other reactors, which at the time were under construction. And that's for the most part going to be the last bit of the power plant that I build for this series. I still do have a decent amount, or not a decent, but I still do have some remaining parts of the power plant to build, just kind of filler in between. Most of that, if not almost all of it, is going to be done off camera, because as I said in the previous episode, I want to focus more so on this town of Pripyat, since, I mean, after all, that is what I am calling this series. But yeah, so we start off here working on these two cooling towers, which were at the time both under construction. They were going to be the cooling towers for reactors 5 and 6, which I'll build in a few minutes from now. But those reactors were under construction as well, and these were going to be their cooling towers. But so as I said, both of these were actually under construction at the time. But unfortunately, this asset that I'm using, which is part of, I believe, Dole's just nuclear power plant pack. But yeah, this particular asset, when I tried to convert it to PO, it just completely disappeared. So I wanted to convert it to PO and try and, manipulate it so it looked like it was under construction, maybe just sink it down into the, so it's smaller than it actually is. But yeah, I couldn't do that. So I kind of just opted to have the thing look completely finished, which, I mean, it's a small detail, I suppose. The actual cooling tower in real life was probably about 60-ish% completed. So, I mean, it was still pretty tall nonetheless. But yeah, I could have probably looked on the workshop for additional cooling towers because there are some. But I don't know. These assets are excellent. Like, they're definitely by far the best on the workshop. They're huge for one, but they're detailed and they look really nice. And yeah, I figured it was a small thing just to have one be completed or look completed, and then have the other one here, as I'm doing now, be under construction, which this is pretty accurate as far as the amount that's actually been built so far. For the most part, there was really the supports, those little triangular supports, whatever those things are called, and a small amount of the cooling tower built on top of that, which I couldn't really do that because the retaining walls, like, you can't lift them up into the air and have, nothing underneath, right? With the retaining walls, when you raise them, they just grow in size, or in height, I should say. So I couldn't really find a way to, I could probably use a prop wall, but, with that, it's not perfectly circular anyway. So I've just left it like that. I think it looks fine. And these cooling towers are also pretty far away from the main part of the power plant, and even further away from Pripyat. So it's going to be something seen off in the distance. So as far as like accurate details go, and trying to get this as realistic as possible, it's not super important, since this is just hardly really going to be seen at all. So as far as the detailing around here goes, I just lay some decals, trying to get the dirt texture to look less monotonous, using the sand so you have the darker muddy looking texture poking through occasionally, and yeah, just trying to make it look like random dirt and mud just here and there. But there was also this little, I don't know if it was storage or perhaps waste from whatever was left over from construction, or who knows, I couldn't really tell in Google Maps. But yeah, that's what I'm building here. I just end up just filling it with the dirt decal and placing, it's less of a trash bin area compared to, it's really more of just, I guess, where they would have had additional supplies and, metal beams, whatever these things are that I'm placing down. I also put down the metal supports here, so I guess that would be extra supplies that they had. Yeah, like I said, I don't really know what was here, so I just kind of plopped down some random looking building construction supplies. But and so I did adjust the intro and the font used for the thumbnail as well as in the intro. So I hope that appeases the few of you who were rather vocal about the font used. And I must say, I originally had no intention of changing it. I mean, there are countless examples of Cyrillic characters used along, Latin characters in English. And really what made me decide to use the font with the Cyrillic characters was with Comrade Intense, a YouTuber who built a really awesome Soviet city, which I will link his, I'll link his cinematic build for the city, which is along to Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture, which is by far the best classical piece in existence. But yeah, he used a font that had a couple Cyrillic characters for the A, which is always used along with the Russian D, and the backwards R, which, I mean, I was fully aware when I was creating it that those don't make the same sounds as in English. I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone knows that. Maybe they don't know what they make exactly. But, I mean, in high school, one summer I was bored, and I just decided to teach myself some Russian using Duolingo. So, I mean, yeah, like I said, initially I really wasn't thinking about using Cyrillic characters in there, but I found a cool font that was similar to the font used by Comrade Intense. So I figured I'd use that. So, I don't know, I'll just leave it at that. I hope you do like the new intro, and yeah, that's pretty much it. But anyways, back to the build here. Placing down the assets to make it actually look like a construction site. These little wall pieces here, which would be, I guess suppose lifted up by the cranes and placed in position. I mean, there's not really a lot of construction props on the workshop, at least that are more or less universal. Like, I mean, these construction cranes here are pretty modern, and there really weren't many alternatives to, place here. So I went ahead and just, used those. But that's pretty much all I did there for the construction, because like I said, it's really not going to be seen very often, except probably the only other time it'll be seen besides in the, in this episode is in the final cinematic episode. Whenever that comes, I'll just, a couple shots of that and that's it. But anyways, so moving on from that part, here we are to the reactor 5 and 6 construction site. So these two reactors were being built at the time of the meltdown in the 4th reactor in the main power plant. And surprisingly, they actually continued construction of these two reactors 3 years after 1986. So in May of '89, they finally decided to cease building the two reactors here and just use the 3 reactors remaining within the main part of the power plant, which the 3 reactors 1, 2, and 3 in the main power plant continued to operate. I forget which year the first one was brought offline, but they basically slowly just decommissioned, or actually technically it's not decommissioned, I believe, the power plant, but realistically they slowly, periodically just stopped using the reactors into, I believe, the late 90s. I forget which one, or I probably should have looked that up beforehand, but I did mention it in the previous episode. But anyways, interestingly enough, the night of the meltdown in the 4th reactor, the workers continued, doing their job at this location. And even the next morning, work wasn't called off. I believe the second day after the meltdown is when they stopped for a short amount of time. But with only a couple exceptions, they continued construction, throughout the entire process of, the authorities dealing with a massive disaster next door. And they continued building it until '89, which, I don't know, that's kind of crazy to think. But, yeah, so there weren't a lot of, I don't know, there weren't a lot of assets that I could use to make this look more realistic. I did my best. And also the current state of this particular area and the buildings around it is really bad. Like, it's rusting away, it's falling apart. It's, you know, compared to pretty much anywhere else in this in the power plant as well as the city. I don't know why. Maybe it's just a lot of exposed metal, but a lot of it's just rusting away. But so there, I couldn't really get a lot of good images and see what it looked like, because I don't think there were any pictures of this construction site that I've saw prior to the nuclear meltdown. So yeah, this was based entirely off of pictures how it is today and Google Maps basically. So the only remotely accurate part really of this, I'd say, is just the general building location. And I mean, the big building there is where they placed, or at least where I imagine, the 2 reactors were being built in the real life location. And there were a ton of these cranes. I only placed a couple just because, again, I mean, the crane is just obviously modern, so it kind of sucks that I had to use it. I didn't really see anything good on the workshop. I did use another different crane, which is in the same construction pack, I believe, as that one crane, so it's still modern, but it looks a little, I guess, more plausible as something from the 80s. So I do add one more crane that looks like that. But there were like at least half a dozen cranes here, and I guess they still are there, obviously, since nothing's been touched. But yeah, so I only placed 2. Just I feel I did mess around later with more, but I just kind of deleted them because it kind of looked overboard. But yeah, so there's a train track that ran right up along this little cooling pond here. I don't know, the track here could maybe have been temporary, just to bring supplies and all the equipment to build the reactor. Because when I was building the main part of the power plant in the previous episode and looking at maps and pictures and stuff, there were a couple tracks that just kind of seemed to go nowhere. And there was one track coming out of the power plant and then crossing one of the cooling ponds and just kind of dead ends in the electrical substation. And I mean, there was nothing there. There was just power lines surrounding it. So I'm not sure if that's something that they might have ripped up some of the tracks there and replaced it with the electrical substation, or I'm not really sure. You know, it's hard to tell just looking at a map. But yeah, there was a couple instances where it just kind of seemed like that's a weird place for a track, just kind of dead ends with nothing around it. And yeah, so I assume there were a couple temporary tracks, which makes sense. But yeah, so we are finally getting into building Pripyat. So here I'm placing the famous sign for Pripyat with the year of its founding. And yeah, here basically the first block that we are building for the town. So in this episode, we only build this one little block here, or triangular, not triangular, I guess it's 4-sided, but it's a, whatever you want to call it. So it's basically a block. But I do build off camera on the opposite side of the main road that leads in. I do build another little block there. And I also detail that one off camera. And the whole reason I did that was really just to get a feel of like detailing and building a Soviet styled city, because I've never done anything like it. And looking at maps and pictures and aerial views of, Soviet cities that are still in existence, you can do that if, say, I'm building any other city in Russia or, in the Eastern Europe, because they are all not covered in trees and completely abandoned. So looking at Google Maps or Google Earth, the big buildings stick out, yes, but there are tons of things in between that simply you can't see because it's just trees all over the place, obviously. So I did find this one map on some website, which actually has an older aerial or older satellite view of the area. So there's a little less trees, but most importantly, it actually color codes all the building locations based on if they're public buildings, if they're residential, these apartment buildings, and factory buildings, everything in between. And it actually names what it is, at least the more important ones. So, for instance, next episode, which is probably going to be the best one in the series, because it's going to be heavily PO dependent, and we're going to be building the main plaza, the main city center, with all the really cool looking Soviet style buildings, with all the public buildings like the Palace of Culture and some of the hotels, and just all the cool looking, just classic Soviet styled architecture. So that one will be cool. That'll be in the next episode. It'll definitely be a test with procedural objects for certain, because there's a couple buildings on the workshop which I could use, but I definitely want to make this area extremely recognizable. I created a couple signs, just very basic in Blender, to, in, I guess, Ukrainian, so they just based on, like, for the Palace of Culture, energetic as it was called. I made a sign for that, as well as a hotel next to it, and I want to make a couple more signs, at least for the more iconic buildings, because many of these apartment buildings were even labeled on the very top with, what I have no idea what they would have said. Probably, perhaps, apartment complex number, maybe a name named after, some historical person important to the Soviet society. Probably something like that. I'm not really sure, but yeah. And all the public buildings, at least from what I have seen, were also labeled and had signage on the top saying what they were. And so it's kind of unreasonable to do that for all these buildings, all the public buildings, because I would have to make individual signs in Blender. And more importantly, I don't want to get it wrong either, because I could probably just make a generic sign that says school, hotel, hospital, clinic. But, they were more specific, and they had much longer names, at least from the ones I've seen. They were more specific to what they were. So I'll add a couple more. If there's a sign that I should make that you can think of, because as I'll say, I've made already the sign for the Palace of Culture, as well as a hotel that was next door. That's it as of now. So if you happen to be familiar with this, or maybe you have some images in which you can say exactly what the sign read, then let me know in the comments, and say what it is in English, and then give me the translation to Ukrainian. But yeah, so what we're doing now, you can see, I guess, since I mentioned earlier for a second there, but the other block for the residential area, like I said, I detailed that out right there to the right there, you can see it. So that was, like I said, my trial and error, more or less, because initially I really went tree heavy on that. But in reality, this area was like pretty much all the, I guess they're called micro districts. There was 5 micro districts, which I'm just going to call residential blocks, because they're more or less that. They have a few public buildings in them, like schools, maybe a gym, swimming pool, stuff like that. But for the most part, they're just residential apartment buildings. But anyways, as I was saying, they were really, I don't want to say plain, because that's not a really accurate description, but there was just a lot of open space, a lot of well-manicured grass, just for, people to hang out and enjoy life. Because really, Pripyat was pretty much an ideal model city for, Soviet life. Like, if you were going to live in the Soviet Union, then Pripyat, as far as just the amenities and how nice it was, then this was definitely probably where you want to be. Like, even by today's standards, I mean, there was, like I said, each little micro district had, schools and gyms, swimming pools, and a whole lot more, cinemas. And then, of course, the center area, which was which we'll build in the next episode, with a bunch of public buildings and even a stadium. So, I mean, life here was definitely a little unique compared to the rest of the Soviet Union, because it is just another one of the many closed, industrial towns. So this is a closed nuclear town in the Soviet Union. And many of those were not the best, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, from what I've read and just what I've seen, even before this, I started doing the series, Pripyat was a very, very nice city. And trying to recreate all these open areas is definitely hard in City Skylines, because leaving stuff blank, undetailed, just looks wrong. It doesn't look realistic. But I mean, I do place still a decent amount of trees, probably a little more than there actually were in real life. And that's simply because it's, like I said, it's just looks weird to leave so much open space. But I do add some more things in a sec, including like playgrounds and just a couple basketball courts. It's kind of funny because I placed a couple basketball courts down when I was building the other residential block, just because I have no idea what else to place. And I feel like I know some places in Europe, like especially the Baltics, they love their basketball. And I have no idea if Ukrainians like their basketball. I mean, I'm sure there's certainly some following of basketball in the Ukraine or back then, but I wasn't entirely sure if that was realistic. And then I happened to come across a couple pictures with a lot of basketball courts. So I definitely do place a decent amount of basketball courts, because evidently that is actually quite realistic. But so yeah, here we are placing down the playgrounds. There were certainly a lot of those in Pripyat for all the children. I did read somewhere that the average age in the city was only 26. So sounds a little on the low side. At least I would figure it to be a little older, considering, I don't feel like you'd want to trust a couple young 20-year-olds working at a nuclear power plant, but I could be wrong, I guess. But so for the remaining of the episode, it's pretty much just doing these small little, details. So I'm finishing off these little playgrounds here, and then also building like the basketball courts and like a couple other smaller things, because I have to give a shout out to Igor on Instagram. If you're watching this, he reached out to me when I posted something asking for help if anyone knew any must-haves, and basically if this isn't in the city, then it's basically not a Soviet city. Like, that's kind of what I wanted to know. And he offered a lot of resources, a lot of websites, which is going to make this series a lot more easier for sure, because they're all in Russian, and I have to translate it, of course, with Google. But kind of funny, when I was searching through all this stuff, like I was searching basically what those websites were titled, but I guess Google in the US didn't want to put me to a Russian website. But yeah, so shout out to you, man. Certainly provided me with a lot to go on, and because really I didn't really know what to place to fill in these gaps here, and it's still hard. I mean, I'm still getting used to building in this style. I mean, same thing goes for when I started building, for Berlin Noir. I mean, in all honesty, those first couple episodes of the series kind of suck. I mean, just as far as accuracy and style goes, I just didn't have a feel of it quite yet. So, I mean, since this is a mini-series, I kind of need to learn fast, since I only have a couple episodes to make this the best that I can. But yeah, so any of you who have any additional things I should add to, even this area, because by no means is this really finished. But, I mean, I'm going to be coming in, in future episodes, probably off camera, just adding a couple things here and there. But yeah, let me know what you think I should add, and also for future episodes. But yeah, so we're pretty much done. And so I hope you guys enjoyed this and are looking forward to some more of Pripyat. And I will see you all next week.